What is going on, guys and girls? It's Ghost Robo, and today the new 2015 Assassin's Creed was revealed. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC on October 23rd, 2015. I'm here to give you my impressions, my take, my thoughts, and my hopes for this game based on what we've seen today and what I have read and amassed through all of the info that has been released. Now, the first interesting thing is that this is all pre-alpha footage, so it's not final, and it probably will, hopefully, maybe just might look better, more full, more complete when the game actually does come out. One of those rare times where instead of showing us target footage and then our hopes slowly slide down that slope, maybe we'll actually climb a hill this time and go from early pre-alpha footage to full release footage and be like, wow, they really made this game come together. But first things first, Ubisoft has confirmed that this game is next-gen only, and going forward, they are only interested in next-gen consoles and PC. No more development for 360 and PS3 except for Just Dance. All their major franchises going forward will exist as next-gen / current-gen franchises only. So that is one of two things, either a big bummer if you don't have a next-gen console, or a real cool commitment if you have already made the upgrade. Now, the game itself takes place in Victorian London and surrounding area. They've said, I think, 7 boroughs in the game, and interestingly enough, the game features 2 protagonists, a tag team brother-sister duo of Jacob Fry and Evie Fry. You're seeing Jacob in the trailer here. He's got that nice top hat, and I think we'll cover some of the positives first here as we go through this pre-alpha footage of this early mission that they revealed today. So I think it's pretty cool that they're moving the game forward in time. You know, they started off Assassin's Creed 1 way back when, and we're marching further and further up the timeline to eventually a point where I wonder if Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed will converge, but that's just pure speculation. It is moving towards more modern-day society, more modern-day cities, and more of a modern-day feel. I thought it was cool to note that Jacob, your main character, he puts on a top hat while he's walking the streets and then slips that off and dons the hood when he's ready to sneak and stealth around. Sneaking and stealthing has been revamped. It looks like they have a renewed focus on the stealth aspect of things, although they have removed the hard snap for cover, which I find a bit odd. And one of my biggest complaints about the Assassin's Creed franchise is sort of the clumsiness of the controls and the consistent feeling that you are encouraging your character to go somewhere rather than full-on guiding them. You're pointing them in the right direction rather than dictating their movements. Perhaps by removing the hard cover, the snap too, maybe that does allow for more flexibility and therefore more precise control. I saw some new animations in this footage in terms of the rolling and whatnot that I thought was promising. But I am concerned because I thought the hard snap was great in both Watch Dogs and AC Unity. At least that was something that I enjoyed. The city itself, I think, looks pretty good. Now, I can't really say the same for the people and maybe some of the finer details. But again, this is pre-alpha footage, so we'll give them a pass on that. Assassin's Creed Unity was no slouch from a visual standpoint. It was a slouch from a technical standpoint, and Ubisoft, were quick to announce and apologize that, hey, we acknowledge that we made big mistakes there, and we hope that we'll fix them, or we will fix them going forward. I personally hope that they fix them. There's no guarantee of anything these days, what with all the downgrades and delays we see across the board. Now, the game is very gang-centric, which I think could be an interesting idea. Typically, the assassins operate from this position of extreme haughtiness, almost like a godlike hierarchy. You're always dealing with grandmasters and things like that. And I wonder if sort of moving it towards like this gang mentality maybe will introduce a new style of main character, perhaps a new style of mission. That would be my hope. Like something that, deviates from the traditional Assassin's Creed formula. Right there, you saw him remove the cap. And you're about to see one of the cool new features as well, which is this grappling hook that allows you to quickly ascend buildings. Again, climbing in the games are really fun, and I hope that they're really enhanced here because the buildings look to be a lot taller. Assassin's Creed 3 for me was the low point where the buildings were quite at their lowest point, and I loved the height and the verticality of Assassin's Creed Unity. That was probably my favorite part of the game. You're seeing Eagle Vision. A lot of this stuff, though, looks very darn familiar, and as much as they want to try and say that, oh, it's a bold, brand new Assassin's Creed, I get the sense that at least in this pre-alpha footage of the game, I mean, this could very well be a DLC pack for Assassin's Creed Unity, just from this early stuff. Again, this is an early mission, but I do like some hints that they are moving forward. One thing you'll see is a faster combat system. It seems like the animation has been upped in terms of fluidity, and there's a lot more speed in his punches, his attacks, his quick disposal of enemies, which is something that can kind of get tedious in Assassin's Creed. You're noticing knife throws and things that we have seen in previous games, so not a whole lot new in this footage here. One thing that was rumored to be shown late last year in a leaked piece of information / screenshots was like this inside battle that took place in a train station, where now we know Jacob was using his grappling hook to swing around and using his cane and navigating sort of this dynamic environment that had also some set-piece feel to it in terms of these trains and a fight on stagecoaches. They make note, and you've already seen traversal by carriage. I thought it was kind of funny that they're like, it gives you faster travel than ever, and then the carriage moved like 2 miles an hour. They also claim that the city is going to be more lifelike and full than ever before, but this, at least, footage shows it to be quite empty. And again, that could all be modified and made right later on. But one thing that I want to point out, because a lot of times, you know, people will criticize a game or say that, oh, they hope for this, but not really give specifics of what they'd like to see. So here is sort of my hope for what we see. One, I would love to see, I think they have to go one of two ways. Either you have to go with extreme hustle bustle, chaos in the streets. Almost think of like Times Square, but set back in time. Like, we need extreme crowds and that sort of stuff. I actually liked when Unity did that. I thought it was interesting when you had those big mashups of just hundreds of people. I thought it was both impressive technically, and I thought it was impressive and intriguing to go through, and it felt more like you were actually an assassin navigating these crowds. And as we progress the timeline more and more towards the modern day, I think it's important that the game does give you that very assassin in the midst feel, because when you have giant wide alleyways and streets with not a whole lot going on, it really reveals the X's and O's of the game. And what I mean by that is, you start to see how everything is just very pattern-based in terms of where your focus is, and I feel like then the world around you, the surrounding environment and the immersiveness sort of dips a little bit, and you become focused more on rote maneuvers and accomplishing tasks from point A to point B, from X to X, from O to O, as opposed to being a part of this living, breathing world. So I think they either need to go crazy hustle bustle with the streets, and I would assume that at this time period in London there was a lot of that, and maybe we'll see it and it just wasn't revealed in this pre-alpha. I'm going to stop giving that caveat because you guys understand this is early footage, so I'm not saying that any of this stuff is gonna, I mean, for all we know, the game changes by the time it comes out. Well, except for Jacob Fry, because they've already announced collector's editions with him. And we didn't get to see much of Evie today, but I think she's very interesting. And on that positive front, I love the fact that there's a female main character. I hope she does have a focal role in the game and doesn't take a backseat to Jacob. Heck, I would love it if Evie was either a choice from the beginning or got 50% or more of the game. I think her character model looks more interesting than Jacob's, and I just think in general, playing as a sweet, kind of stealthy, swift girl within one of these AC games would be pretty cool, especially as it moves into this London era. Just the attire and stuff seems to be more fun for females. I don't think that this villain here looks very good, and I would love to see them improve some of their character models, because Assassin's Creed seems to have just a weird look to it. Now, this game is being developed by a different studio than did Unity. It's been in development from somewhere around 2 to 3 years. I would guess closer to 2. And so, with that in mind, they are not taking, like, Unity and then building the next Assassin's Creed. Like, theoretically, that would be next year's game or the year after that. This was, at least in some part, developed in conjunction with Unity. And so I think that's why it has a lot of a similar feel visually and gameplay-wise. And that would be sort of my, like, note going forward is, let's see how much this ends up being AC Unity in London, or is it its own thing? So I mentioned one route they could go, which is big hustle and bustle. The other route that I think they could go, and that I personally would love to see them go, is the very in-depth indoor environment approach, which would be much more akin to like Batman Arkham City, the upcoming Batman Arkham Knight, at least what that promises to be, which is that you have big open sprawling city, but then majority of your missions and your big fun take place inside these handcrafted environments. You know, it's one thing to say we have this big open world where all of your skills can be used wherever you want, but I feel like you create greater gameplay, memories, experiences, and moments when you handcraft a specific environment. One thing I liked about Watch Dogs was when it went hyperlinear. I loved some of those indoor missions when it allowed you to be this hyper detective and utilize your skills in a very prescribed way, because I felt like that maximized the good of the gameplay and maximized the immersion within your role in that game in modern day or slightly futuristic Chicago. To just all of a sudden go around the streets doing whatever, wherever, to me that takes a little bit away from it. And if I think back to my favorite Assassin's Creed, which is AC2, the thing I loved about that was one, the era and the aesthetic. I think it just lended itself perfectly to AC. But two, the fact that there were so many moments, like being a part of this Colosseum climb was glorious. Being part of some of the classic Roman architecture was glorious. And there obviously are set pieces like that. There were in Unity, there will be in Syndicate, but I'm just not so sure what the structures lend themselves to. You know, it becomes a bit of a concern as we do climb closer and closer to a merging point between Watch Dogs timeline and Assassin's Creed timeline, just in terms of the day and date. You know, like, one of the appeals of Assassin's Creed was exploring these ancient and beloved eras in history. And as you creep closer, do you reach a point, sort of like Assassin's Creed 3, where it's like, well, this isn't interesting anymore. This is just like a very, 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 you know, pedestrian version of what we have today. If you think back to the early Assassin's Creed games, those cities are very unique in their structure. And I think that last year's Unity and now this year's Syndicate will struggle slightly with the feeling that they are, at least from my impression, watered-down versions of modern-day cities. And they didn't discuss anything about the modern-day component of this game. We know that it'll be in there. We know that Unity kind of messed with it in a different way than the past. I kind of still wish Desmond's story was going on. As much of a mess as it was at the end, there was some serious like fun in some of that early Abstergo stuff and trying to solve the mystery and understanding what was going on. And I liked where that was going. And I love the fact that you sort of had this modern day face and figure to attach onto, and it felt like almost like a TV show where like you were getting flashbacks and flash forwards and all of this connection that gave it some added drama. And story would be somewhere that I hope that they can improve as well. I didn't really find much attachment to the AC Unity story, and maybe they're doubling down on that because they have also announced there's no multiplayer, no co-op, no multiplayer. You could look at that as a step backwards in terms of removal of features, or you could look at that as a step forward in terms of, you know, focusing in on the main meat and potatoes of the game. There's so much left unknown, right? There's just so much that we don't know and can't know, and they've talked about, and they show these hype trailers. And when I see this trailer that you're watching now again, that we saw at the beginning of the video, I get really excited about Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I always want them to take that step and to evolve themselves to a point where I can say, wow, this really feels like AC3, because I feel like we've been kind of stuck in neutral since AC2. Some people would argue that Black Flag was that game for them, but for me, that one didn't really grab me, and so I'm like, where is the real sequel to Assassin's Creed 2 that improves upon the game in the ways that 2 did on 1, rather than just maintain the game? And maybe that's cool for some people, and maybe that's the goal of the franchise, is just to maintain and switch out the scenery, and that's totally great. But I would love to see, especially as they make a fresh commitment to next gen, like, what are we going to get that's really next gen about this, that sets this apart and says Assassin's Creed has leveled up? If you look at a lot of franchises over the years, typically, maybe not in this generation, but typically in the past, their reveal or their emergence on the next console was one of quite a lot of awe. And I felt like Unity did that a bit with the verticality and sort of the scope, and then that was all brought back down to ground level when they had so many tech issues. So maybe this is the game that capitalizes on those promises, perhaps. But I'm very curious to know what you guys think. Make sure to get talking at me in the comments below. Do you feel like this is showing you anything new? Do you feel like this is showing you anything promising? What do you think about either them going the route of very chaotic open city or very hyper-focused, detailed, prescribed indoor environments? I just feel like the skill set that Assassin's Creed has in terms of its stealth, in terms of its climbing, like some of my favorite moments of Unity were those indoor sections where you were facing off against, you know, an assassination target or whatnot. Like, that was to me where the game shined, wandering around, same with Watch Dogs. Like, that was my least favorite part of Watch Dogs, was wandering around like, well, you could do this here, well, you could hack this here, well, you could, you know, punch this guy here, you could shoot this person here, I mean, you could sneak here, you could climb this here. I like it when they say, like, hey, here is a scenario. Now, how are you going to use your skills to accomplish this scenario? And you could argue that that happens in the open streets, but I hope I'm making some semblance of sense here. Like, that does happen in the open streets, but it's much more generic and more of like, look what I can do, Mom, as opposed to, okay, how can I puzzle solve this scenario with my given tool set? And that's where I would hope they would go. And today's footage, you know, like I said at the top, typically they go for like whiz-bang wow factor, and I felt like they went more down to earth today, and I'm not sure what kind of tone that sets. I'm keeping myself pretty darn neutral on Assassin's Creed this year, because last year I was insanely hyped for Unity. I thought it would be my game of the year, my most anticipated game. And it turned out to be one of my biggest disappointments. And I think across the board, people were kind of let down by its performance issues. It's just overall progress in terms of where that series has gone. And we're seeing them take some steps in response to the community. For example, the inclusion of a female protagonist, you know, the zooming forward the timeline, even like slight tweaks. I have to imagine a response, like the fact that, okay, why is this assassin wearing a hood and not being noticed in the streets? Well, now he has a top hat, so that solves that. It does not look like it's going to take a leap forward graphically, and that was something that AC Unity definitely hitched itself to, was like, look at the new graphics that we have here. So, going forward, like, Syndicate's going to have to show us something from a gameplay or a story standpoint or a new feature standpoint to really sell us before you get complacent. You don't want to get complacent. That has happened to plenty of franchises, Call of Duty, Guitar Hero, Madden, all sorts, and they have hit low points. And I wonder at what juncture do they say, hey, we really need to step our game up, and I'm hopeful that it is Syndicate. I have to give you my blunt take after watching this stuff, and that is that I'm really concerned that this is going to be an Assassin's Creed MOTS, more of the same, and that it will feel like the Brotherhood of Revelations to 2, but the Syndicate to Unity. They talk about there is an acquisition of members, sort of like a gang type thing. So that could be interesting. Like I said, that to me seems like one of the more intriguing options that this game could provide, is like a differentiation of the typical like Assassin's Creed. They're including all the stuff, you know, Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, historical figures. You can hijack, ride, fight on top of carriages. And again, the stealth stuff I mentioned, recruiting different allies and whatnot. There is a day-night cycle, which I do think is really cool, and I will give them credit for bringing that back in, which is pretty awesome. They do say that the modern-day stuff will, quote, follow in the footsteps of Unity. I bring back Desmond, or give me, like, I don't know, Desmond's son, someone, like, give me something, a modern-day girl that's... I just liked when they had that connection, and I felt like those two storylines built to a culmination, and that pulled me forward. Like the whole thing in AC2 where you were hunting glyphs and mystery, I love that. The intrigue there was quite compelling, and I feel like that's been removed, and now there are collectibles all over the place, but they're collectibles for the sake of collectibles. And at a certain point, like I mentioned, one like little takeaway of my whole spiel here is, like, as you bring these games closer to the modern era, when does it just feel like a watered-down Watch Dogs or watered-down GTA? Because a lot of the appeal of Assassin's Creed is the historical nature, and I hope that they're able to find that, because whether it was boats in AC Black Flag, whether it was beautiful structures and things of massive ancient implication in Assassin's Creed 2, those were some of the biggest driving factors in the success of those games. And I'm pinpointing those two as what I feel is some of people's favorites. To me, AC3, even though it drew upon a very, like, remembered part of history, didn't do as well. And so what will Syndicate do to set itself apart? Keep in mind that this is all early. Keep in mind that I'm very hopeful. Keep in mind that I'm looking forward to seeing more and playing it, hopefully sometime soon, E3 or wherever else. I will be checking it out, and I will bring you that coverage. But make sure to let me know in the comments below what you think of this game, where you think it's headed, what you want to see. If you've got any concerns, hopes, dreams, worry, And that is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. It used to be called Victory. Kind of like the idea of Assassin's Creed Victory. A little bit more than Syndicate, but what's a name? Just a name. It's on the box art, and that's about it. Thank you guys and girls so much for watching. This video is going to wrap up here. Until next time, everyone, thanks so much. Have a fantastic day. Drink some hot chocolate. We will see you all later.